I'm Frank Alexander, the Sam Nunn Professor of Law at Emory Law School in Atlanta. I'm also co-founder of the Center for Community Progress. Over the past 20 years, most of my work has been in the field of identifying ways to acquire, manage, and dispose of vacant and abandoned properties in our cities and counties throughout the country.
Great.
Land banks are special purpose, highly focused governmental entities. They're designed to address vacant and abandoned properties and the liabilities that are being imposed on our neighborhoods, our communities, our cities and counties, our school districts. When a piece of property is vacant and substandard, the costs are imposed on all the rest of us. Land banks are local government entities that have as their focus the acquisition of these properties, the maintenance, either rehabilitation or demolition of the structures, and then the return of these properties to productive use as locally determined by the community. The earliest land banks in the country, and what I have termed the first generation of land banks in the country, were designed to go after those properties that were stuck in the tax foreclosure system. In most states, the laws provide that when taxes are delinquent, at some point they're taken to a tax sale. But the minimum bid at the tax sale is the amount of taxes that are owed. And when taxes have gotten to the point that they exceed fair market value, the properties are locked. The properties are dead to the marketplace. So we began to create land banks in the 1980s to receive the properties for which there was no bid, and then be able to clean the property and put it back into productive use. In other jurisdictions, we discovered that what was happening is speculators were buying at tax sales and never investing anything in maintaining or fixing up the property. So we modified the laws to allow land banks to acquire property directly at tax sales with the preference given to the governmental entity over third-party speculators. We also use land banks to receive donations of property. When we cannot find the owner of the property and the owner admits that they haven't done anything for years and that taxes are very high, they frequently are willing to give up the property. In which case, in Atlanta, in Flint, in Cleveland, we have it set up such that the owner can convey the property to the land bank. The land bank then extinguishes taxes on the property it owns and conveys it back out to a new responsible owner. There is a huge variation among land bank structures throughout the United States. Some land banks have no staff and use existing city and county staff. Other land banks will have a staff of 30. Land banks' budgets range from 0 to 6 million. So it is difficult to generalize about land banks because they need to be locally structured and locally operated. The properties need to be reused as locally determined. But I can say this, those land banks which are successful are those which remained highly focused on the problem they're trying to solve. Land banks are not redevelopment authorities and should not be redevelopment authorities. Land banks will not solve all forms of land use. Land banks generally are not those that are zoning and planning entities and should not be. Land banks are special purpose entities which go after the problem properties, the litter which has been abandoned in our communities, and saying, no longer will we tolerate littering. We will now own that property and repurpose it. Pennsylvania has the most recent third-generation land bank statute in the country. It is right now the model for the entire country. It gives communities throughout the state of Pennsylvania the opportunity to use a tool that was not available before the end of last year. My suggestion to every land bank or every local community that is considering a land bank is that it sit down and very carefully identify why it needs a land bank. What are the characteristics of the properties that it is concerned with in its own neighborhood, its municipality, its city? And does that property need to be addressed with the powers that are now found in the Pennsylvania Land Bank Statute? If so, you can act, and you can act quickly. But first, identify the characteristics of the problem parcels. Second, build the collaboration of your civic leadership, your city leadership, and your neighborhoods so that everyone agrees as to why you are doing what you are doing. And then you have everyone to begin to think about what you can do with that land when it becomes available.